What if death was never random? What if it had a plan? And what if, no matter how many lives you save, you were never actually escaping it? You were only delaying the inevitable. This is Final Destination, Bloodlines. It doesn't begin with a plane crash, or a highway pileup, or a collapsing bridge. It begins with something far more personal. A young woman named Elena begins experiencing something she cannot explain. Not dreams. Not hallucinations. But patterns. She sees people dying before it happens. Not clearly. Not fully. Just fragments. A reflection cracking. A traffic light turning red at the wrong time. A name written in an obituary she hasn't read yet. At first, she assumes stress. Anxiety. Maybe inherited trauma. But the visions don't stop. They intensify. Because death, in this universe, does not speak loudly. It whispers through coincidence. Elena soon discovers something buried in her family history, something her relatives tried to hide for decades. A disaster that should have claimed multiple lives, but didn't. A group of people survived an event they were never meant to survive. And ever since that moment, their bloodline has been marked. Not cursed in a traditional sense, but tracked. Because death does not forget corrections. It does not abandon unfinished designs. It returns. Patiently. Generationally. One by one. People connected to that original survival begin dying in increasingly impossible ways. Not random accidents, but intricate sequences. Chain reactions so precise they feel engineered. A spilled drink leads to a broken glass. A broken glass leads to a fall. A fall leads to a machinery malfunction. And within seconds, a life is erased. Elena realizes the terrifying truth. This isn't just about survivors. It's about inheritance. Death is not hunting individuals anymore. It is correcting an entire bloodline. And she is next in line. As panic spreads through her family, denial becomes the first defense. Some refuse to believe it. Others try to outsmart it. A few attempt to escape the pattern entirely by isolating themselves from everything, technology, people, even movement. But death adapts. It doesn't need proximity. It only needs probability. Every environment becomes a weapon. Every object becomes a potential trigger. A ceiling fan. A loose wire. A cracked staircase. The world itself turns into a silent machine waiting to complete its sequence. Elena begins researching past incidents connected to the phenomenon. What she discovers changes everything. There have always been survivors. People who escaped mass death events. But none of them were ever truly safe. They all died later. In strange, unrelated, seemingly accidental ways. But when mapped together, the pattern is undeniable. Death's design is not immediate. It is delayed correction. A ledger that must eventually balance. Elena and the remaining members of her bloodline attempt to break the cycle by identifying what originally saved their ancestors. They believe that if they can understand why death failed before, they can predict how it will strike now. But the deeper they dig, the clearer it becomes. There was never a mistake. Only postponement. Because death doesn't fail. It recalculates. One of the most terrifying realizations comes when Elena understands that every attempt to avoid fate has only made the outcomes more complex. The more they interfere, the more elaborate the deaths become. Simple accidents evolve into multi-step tragedies involving timing, physics, and human error aligning perfectly. It is not chaos. It is precision disguised as chaos. As the body count rises, paranoia fractures the remaining survivors. No one trusts anything. Not vehicles. Not buildings. Not even each other. Because in a system designed like this, anyone could be an accidental trigger. A single movement. A single choice. A single second of impatience. And everything collapses. Elena begins to isolate the only possible constant. Her own awareness. If death's design adapts to behavior, then awareness itself becomes both weapon and curse. She starts predicting near-misses moments before they happen. But foresight comes with a price. Because knowing what comes next does not stop it. It only lets you watch it unfold in slow motion. The final act of the story pushes Elena into a confrontation with the core truth of the franchise universe. Death cannot be defeated. It can only be negotiated with time. Every survivor is living on borrowed seconds. And every second must eventually be collected. In a desperate attempt, Elena tries something no one before her has successfully done. Not escaping death, but redirecting the sequence. She attempts to sacrifice herself strategically to break the chain entirely, believing that voluntary acceptance might end the pattern for her remaining family. But death is not emotional. It does not reward sacrifice. It only completes equations. The final sequence begins unfolding across multiple locations simultaneously. A hospital wing. A construction site. A highway intersection. Separate threads of causality converge toward one unavoidable outcome. Elena realizes too late that she was never meant to survive long enough to understand the system. Her awareness itself was part of the design. The moment she understood the pattern, she became the final variable. In the closing moments, every previous connection converges into a single, inevitable correction. The bloodline is not just being punished. It is being finalized. And just like that, the design completes itself. No warning. No mercy. No exception. Because in this world, death does not chase you. It waits for its schedule to finish. And when it does, it always arrives on time. In the aftermath, what remains is silence. Not peace. Not relief. Just absence. Another branch of the bloodline erased from the equation. Another correction completed. Another reminder that survival was never escape. Only delay. And somewhere in the invisible structure of fate, the design continues to expand. Because as long as someone escapes death, the pattern is never truly finished. It only moves forward, looking for its next correction. If you enjoyed this recap, subscribe to Movie Story Recaps for more intense cinematic breakdowns like this. Comment which movie you want next. Because in this universe, you don't cheat death. You only borrow time.